Caleb had lived on the ranch his entire life, and by the time he turned 48, the land felt like a part of his own body. Every hill, every fence line, every dusty path carried the marks of his years of work. But lately, the ranch felt heavier. Almost like it was leaning on him instead of standing strong. The drought had dried the fields until the soil cracked like old paint. The cattle were thinning, the grass was yellow, and the bills were piling up in a drawer he avoided opening. He had never been one to complain, but even he could feel the weight settling on his shoulders in a way he hadn't felt before. And then there was Maya. She had arrived 6 months earlier, carrying one small bag and a silence that felt as loud as any storm. She was only 15 but looked older in the way she held herself, as if life had already pushed her too far. After the sudden tragedy in her immediate family, Caleb was the only relative who could take her in. He didn't think twice about it. But he soon realized that taking care of a grieving teenager was harder than fixing fences or chasing runaway cattle. Maya spoke very little, ate very little, and smiled not at all. She stayed in her room for most of the day, and when she wasn't inside, she wandered the ranch like a ghost, never asking questions, never showing excitement, never revealing anything about what was happening inside her heart. Caleb tried his best to make her comfortable. He made sure her room was warm, cooked simple meals she might like, and tried gently to ask about school or friends, but every attempt ended with short answers or quiet nods. He didn't blame her, he knew loss himself, but he wished he could find a way to help her breathe a little easier. He wished he could take some of the pain off her young shoulders. One afternoon, Caleb decided they needed a change of routine. He noticed Maya watching the horses from a distance almost every day, sometimes for long periods, as if she wanted to walk closer but didn't know if she should. Horses had always helped Caleb clear his mind. Maybe, he thought, they could help Maya too, so he approached her room and knocked softly. "Maya," he said, keeping his voice slow and calm, "how about we go for a ride today?" She didn't open the door right away. He heard a faint rustle from inside. Then silence. Finally, she replied, "I don't know how." "That's all right, I'll teach you. We'll just go slow." When she stepped out, she kept her gaze low, her long hair partly covering her face. Caleb didn't push her to talk. He just guided her toward the stable, walking beside her in silence. Sometimes silence was the safest space, and he wanted her to know she didn't need to say anything she didn't want to. At the stable, he introduced her to a calm brown horse named Willow. Willow was gentle, patient, and had a way of sensing when someone was scared or tense. Caleb rested his hand on the horse's neck. "This one's special," he told Maya. "She's kind. She listens." Maya hesitated before reaching out her hand. When Willow lowered her head, Maya slowly touched her nose. A small spark lit in her eyes, just a flicker, but enough for Caleb to notice. It was the first sign of life he'd seen in her in days. He showed her how to place the saddle, how to hold the reins, and how to sit with balance. Maya listened carefully, but looked nervous. "It's okay," Caleb said gently. "You don't have to be perfect, just breathe." When she climbed onto Willow's back, she gripped the saddle tightly. Caleb walked beside the horse at first, guiding them through the open yard. The air was warm, the sky pale blue, and the soft wind carried the scent of dry grass. For a moment, it seemed like the world quieted around them. At first, Maya moved stiffly, afraid Willow might do something unexpected. But as the minutes passed, she loosened her grip little by little. She still wasn't smiling, but she wasn't shrinking either. It was a small victory. After a while, Caleb stepped back and let her walk Willow a short distance on her own. She did fine, better than fine. She handled the reins smoothly, and Willow followed her cues like she'd been doing it for years. But then, something changed. When the horse's pace quickened slightly, Maya panicked. Her breath hitched. Her back stiffened. Her hands clenched again. Caleb noticed immediately and rushed forward, grabbing Willow's reins to slow her down. "Maya, you're okay," he said softly. But Maya shook her head and shut her eyes tightly. "I can't handle it. I can't." Caleb's heart tightened. He had no idea whether she was talking about the horse, the ride, or something much bigger. Her voice trembled in a way that didn't sound like fear of falling. It sounded like fear of everything, fear she had carried for months, maybe longer. "Just go further," she cried suddenly. Her words hit Caleb like a cold wave. She didn't open her eyes. Her face twisted with emotion, and her voice cracked, as if the sentence carried more weight than she could handle. He froze for a moment, unsure what she meant. Go further? Did she mean push the horse? Go farther down the trail? Or did she mean something painful she didn't know how to express? Those words circled in his mind again and again. He slowly helped her down from the horse. Her feet touched the ground, but she looked unsteady. Caleb placed a steadying hand on her arm. Maya didn't pull away, which was unusual. Instead, she stayed still, her breathing fast, her eyes full of confusion and exhaustion. "Let's just sit for a bit," he said. He guided her to a fallen log near the stable. They sat there quietly. Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Embarrassed, Caleb pretended not to notice to give her dignity. After a few minutes, she whispered, "I didn't mean the horse." Caleb nodded slowly. "I didn't think you did." She didn't continue. She didn't explain. But she didn't have to. He could hear everything she was trying to say in those few words. She was overwhelmed not by Willow, but by life itself, by expectations, memories, grief, and the pressure she never spoke about. She didn't know how to deal with any of it. And she didn't know how to ask for help. Caleb had seen young calves struggle to stand, and old horses fight to stay alive. He knew what real struggle looked like, but what he saw in Maya was different. It was a silent kind of drowning, invisible to everyone except the person slipping under. He wanted to say something comforting, something wise, but the words didn't come easily. He wasn't good at talking about feelings, so he did what he could. He stayed there beside her, letting her know she wasn't alone. Eventually, her breathing steadied. She didn't look at him, but she didn't pull away either. They sat under the open sky, the sound of the wind brushing past them, as if the ranch itself was trying to offer some comfort. That moment changed something inside Caleb. He realized her struggles ran deeper than he had allowed himself to see. Teaching her to ride a horse wouldn't magically fix anything. She needed support, something he wasn't sure he knew how to give. But he made a silent promise then and there. He would not let her face this battle alone, no matter how hard things became. As the sun lowered toward the horizon, he stood and offered her his hand. She took it slowly. They walked back to the house together. Both quiet, but not the same kind of silence as before. This silence felt shared, as if they were both beginning to understand each other without needing many words. Caleb didn't know what steps he needed to take next. He didn't know how to help a young girl heal from something so deep. But he knew one thing for certain: he was determined to try. And for the first time in a long while, Maya didn't walk ahead or behind him. She walked right beside him. And that, for Caleb, was the first real sign of hope. After that day with the horse, Caleb began watching Maya more carefully. Not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but in the quiet, subtle way a guardian does when he feels something is not right. He noticed small details he hadn't seen before: the dark circles beneath her eyes, the way she flinched slightly when someone spoke too loudly, the way she kept her hands wrapped around her arms as if she was always cold. Even on warm days, she still woke before sunrise, wandering to the porch with her blanket. She would sit there for long stretches, staring into the open fields. To anyone else, she might have looked peaceful, but to Caleb, who lived with silence daily, it was a silence filled with heaviness, not peace. He also noticed she rarely ate a full meal. She would take a small portion and push the rest around her plate. When he quietly added food to her dish, she barely touched it. When he asked if she was okay, she would force a smile and nod quickly, then look away. It wasn't the smile that worried him. It was the speed with which she hid her face afterward. School wasn't going smoothly either. Maya didn't talk about it, but the school counselor called one afternoon while she was still on her way home. The counselor's tone was concerned, gentle but firm. She said Maya had been skipping her weekly guidance sessions. She wasn't speaking in class. She wasn't participating in group work. She often sat alone during break time, staring at her hands instead of talking to anyone. When teachers talked to her, she responded politely but briefly, almost mechanically. Caleb listened quietly, his hand gripping the phone tightly. When the call ended, he stood there in the kitchen for a long while, staring at the floor. He had hoped the ranch's calm environment would help her heal, but everything seemed heavier than he understood. That evening, when Maya returned, he didn't scold her or bring up the call right away. Instead, he tried a gentler route. "How was school?" he asked as she placed her bag near the stairs. "Fine," she replied quickly. He nodded, pretending to accept the answer. "Good. Did you eat lunch?" She gave another quick nod, but her eyes drifted downwards. Caleb could tell the answer wasn't true. It was the same nod she used when she didn't want to explain something. He let her walk upstairs, knowing she needed time. But the worry stayed with him all night. Even after he completed his chores, locked the stable, and shut the lights, he lay awake thinking about the call, thinking about her expression on the horse, thinking about how much pain she must be holding inside. The next morning, he tried another approach. Over breakfast, he said, "Maya, you know you can talk to me, right? About anything. You don't have to deal with things alone." She paused with her spoon halfway to her mouth. Her eyes flickered for a second, as if she wanted to say something. But then she shook her head slightly and muttered, "I'm fine." He didn't press her. He knew pressing her too hard might cause her to close up even more. In the following days, he noticed more signs. One evening, he found her sitting in the barn, curled up beside Willow's stall. Her eyes were red, her cheeks damp. She wasn't crying loudly, she wasn't the type to break down openly, but tears clung to her eyelashes. He approached quietly, not wanting to startle her. She wiped her face quickly with her sleeve, turning away. "Sorry. I'm just tired." He sat down a small distance away, enough space to give her comfort, but close enough that she could feel his presence. Willow reached out her neck and nudged Maya gently. The horse seemed to sense her sadness, and Maya's hand automatically lifted to stroke her. Caleb didn't talk. Sometimes, silence was more comforting than words. They sat there until the sky turned orange. Later that week, things became clearer and worse. Her teacher sent another note saying Maya hadn't turned in her assignments for 2 weeks. When Caleb asked her about it, she shrugged and said she didn't feel like it. Her voice wasn't rude, just empty, void of energy or care. One morning before school, she froze at the doorway. Her breathing sped up, and she clutched her straps too tightly. Caleb realized she was having a moment of overwhelming anxiety. Though she didn't use that word, she simply whispered, "I can't. I don't want to go." Caleb gently took her backpack from her hand. "It's okay," he said. "Let's take a minute." She stood there trembling, her breaths short and uneven. For a girl who rarely showed emotion, this was like a scream without sound. Caleb realized she wasn't just struggling, she was drowning inside her own thoughts. That afternoon, he finally decided to talk to her seriously, but kindly. They sat on the porch as the sun dipped behind the barn. The air smelled of dust and hay, and crickets started to buzz. Caleb leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and said softly, "Maya, I know you're hurting. You don't need to say everything, but I need to understand how to help you." She hugged her knees tightly. "I don't know," she whispered. He waited. Patience had always been a skill of his. Then, slowly, she spoke again, her voice shaking. "People expect things from me. To act normal. To act strong. But I don't feel strong. I feel tired all the time, like nothing matters." Caleb's chest tightened. Hearing her say it out loud felt like watching a fragile piece of glass crack. She continued, tears filling her eyes again. "Everyone keeps asking me how I am. I don't know what to tell them. I don't even know how I feel. I just feel heavy. He had no perfect words, but he spoke from the heart. Maya, you've been through things no one your age should ever go through. You're not weak. You're hurting. And hurting doesn't make you weak. She didn't look up, but her shoulders softened slightly. He kept going, speaking slowly. I'm not expecting you to be strong all the time. You can break down. You can rest. You can tell me when things feel too big. You're not alone here. Her lip trembled. I feel like a burden. Like I make everything harder for you. Caleb shook his head firmly. You're not a burden. Not even close. Taking care of you doesn't make my life harder. It gives me a reason to fight through the hard days. She finally looked at him. Her eyes were full of confusion, sadness, and a quiet need for reassurance, something she didn't know how to ask for openly. But before either of them could say more, her phone buzzed. It was a message from school reminding her about another missed assignment. Maya stared at the screen, her expression tightening. I can't do this, she whispered again. I keep messing up. I keep falling behind. I don't know what's wrong with me. Nothing is wrong with you, Caleb said firmly. You're overwhelmed. And that's okay. We can work through it. But she shook her head, more frustrated now. No. You don't get it. I'm scared all the time. I feel like I can't breathe. I feel like something bad is always going to happen. She didn't cry loudly, but a tear rolled down her cheek. She wiped it quickly, almost angry at herself. Caleb wanted to pull her into a hug, but he didn't want to push her boundaries. Instead, he moved his chair closer and said softly, You're carrying too much by yourself. Let me help carry some of it. You don't have to face everything alone. Maya dropped her face into her hands. For a long moment, all he could hear were distant ranch sounds. The wind over dry grass, a horse snorting, a gate creaking. When she finally lifted her head, her voice was small. I don't know how to fix anything. You don't need to fix everything right now, he said. Just tell me what hurts the most. We'll start there. She stared at him for a moment, then whispered, I'm scared of myself. Scared of what I think sometimes. The words hit Caleb like a lightning strike. This was more serious than anything he had imagined. She wasn't just struggling, she was fighting a silent battle no one could see. He felt fear rise inside him. But he kept his voice calm for her sake. Thank you for telling me, he said softly. I promise we will face this together. We'll get you help. You're not going through this alone anymore. She nodded slightly, as if giving him silent permission to guide her. That night, long after Maya went to bed, Caleb sat at the kitchen table, staring at the dusty lamp. He wasn't thinking about the ranch, the bills, or the drought. All he thought about was Maya's trembling voice. Her fear. Her quiet courage in admitting the truth. He knew now that the situation was deeper, heavier, and more fragile than he had thought. And he also knew that whatever came next would require strength, not the kind used for hauling hay or repairing fences, but the kind needed to help a child heal. For the first time in months, Caleb didn't feel alone either. Because he finally understood the battle Maya was fighting, and he was determined to stand beside her through every step of it. The days that followed were some of the hardest Caleb had seen in years, not because of drought or ranch work, but because he carried a new fear inside him, one he had never faced before. He now understood that Maya's struggle was not just sadness or tiredness. It was something deeper, something that needed real help. And he had no idea how to fix it alone. For the first time in his life, the strong, silent rancher felt completely powerless. Caleb had always been taught to handle problems by himself. His father had been the same way. If the fence broke, you fixed it. If a storm came, you prepared. If life hit you hard, you stood up straight and didn't complain. Asking for help was something men simply didn't do, not in his world. But after hearing Maya say she was scared of her own thoughts, Caleb realized this was not a problem he could fix with tools or toughness. This needed something different, something he didn't have, and that scared him more than anything. The next morning, He sat at the kitchen table long before sunrise. The house was quiet, the sky still dark, and the only sound was the ticking of the old clock. He kept replaying Maya's words in his mind. He rubbed his hands together, unsure of what to do, unsure of where to start. Finally, he reached for his phone. It felt heavy in his hand, as if even the act of calling someone meant admitting he couldn't handle this alone. But he pushed past his pride and dialed the school counselor's number. The phone rang twice before she answered. Her voice was soft, understanding, as if she had been expecting his call. He explained everything: Maya's panic, her fear, her quiet breaking. The counselor listened patiently and then said, "You did the right thing by reaching out. She needs someone to stand beside her. And it sounds like you're trying your best." Those words eased a little of his pressure, but not all. The counselor recommended a therapist in the nearest city, someone who often worked with young people dealing with heavy emotional challenges. Caleb wrote the name and number on the back of an old envelope. Then he thanked her and hung up with a long sigh. Later that day, he approached Maya gently. She was sitting in the barn again, beside Willow, stroking the horse's mane slowly. Willow's calm presence seemed to help her breathe better. Caleb sat down next to her, far enough not to crowd her. "Maya," he began softly, "I talked to someone today. Your counselor. She wants to help us find someone you can talk to." Maya didn't speak at first. Her hand paused on Willow's neck. "A therapist?" she said quietly, as if the word itself felt heavy. He nodded. "Someone trained to help people who feel the way you do. Someone who can guide you." She looked down. "Do you think I need that?" "Yes," he said gently. "And there's nothing wrong with needing it." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. She just nodded once, slowly. Caleb made the appointment that afternoon. It was scheduled for the end of the week. He didn't know what to expect, but he knew it was the right step. But the ranch, as always, refused to wait. The same week he scheduled the appointment, he received a letter from the bank. The ranch was behind on payments again. They were giving him one final extension. After that, they would take legal action. Caleb stared at the letter for a long time. His throat tightened. How could everything fall apart at the same time? How could he save the ranch, support Maya, and keep everything together? He folded the letter and placed it carefully in the drawer, beside dozens of others like it. Then he told himself he would worry about one problem at a time. Maya came first, but the strain showed in small ways. He slept less. He skipped meals without noticing. He walked around with tension in his shoulders and worry in his eyes. Maya noticed it. She didn't say anything, but she noticed. On Wednesday, something unexpected happened. The pastor from the local church stopped by to check on him. Caleb hadn't attended in years, but the pastor had heard about the drought, the cattle issues, and the pressure on local ranchers. He offered help, small things like food for the animals or volunteers for fence repairs. Caleb surprised himself by accepting. For a man who had spent his entire life solving things alone, this moment felt strange but necessary. He thanked the pastor quietly, unable to meet his eyes for too long. But there was relief too, maybe. For once, he didn't have to carry everything on his own shoulders. 2 days later, help arrived in bigger ways than he expected. Neighbors who rarely visited came over with tools and willing hands. Teenagers from the church youth group offered to help clean the barn and fill water troughs. An older rancher, who had once competed with Caleb in auctions, showed up with extra hay bales. Caleb was stunned. He couldn't understand why people suddenly cared so much. But the truth was simple. Everyone in the community admired him. Even if he never realized it, he had helped so many people quietly over the years, fixing roofs after storms, lending equipment, sharing supplies during harsh winters. He never asked for payment. Now, after seeing the ranch struggle, the community wanted to return the kindness. But the help meant more than physical labor. It meant Maya wasn't trapped in a silent house anymore. Suddenly, the ranch was filled with voices and gentle laughter. The sound brought a small sense of life back into the dusty yards, and worn fences. Maya found herself watching from a distance at first, unsure how to fit into the sudden warmth around her. But something surprising happened. One of the volunteers, a girl around her age, approached her. She offered Maya a small smile and said, "Want to help me carry this bucket? It's heavy alone." It wasn't much. But it was the first time someone spoke to Maya without pity or worry. She hesitated, then nodded, and helped. The simple act of carrying a bucket became the first step in opening a small door inside her heart. Day by day, things shifted. Caleb saw Maya slowly spending more time outside. She helped at the ranch. She listened when people talked. She didn't say much, but she didn't run away either, and though she still struggled with the heavy thoughts inside her, she no longer felt completely alone. But the biggest moment came on Friday, the day of her therapy appointment. The drive to the city was quiet. Maya sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Caleb kept glancing at her from the corner of his eye. She looked scared, but also determined. When they arrived, she whispered, "Will you wait for me?" "Of course," he said. The therapist welcomed Maya warmly and invited her inside. Caleb sat in the waiting room, tapping his fingers nervously on his knee. He didn't know how long it would take. He didn't know what she was saying in there. He didn't know if she would come out upset or relieved. But one thing was sure. He hoped she felt safe. When Maya finally walked out, her eyes were a little red, but her shoulders were relaxed in a way he hadn't seen in months. She didn't say much, just quietly whispered. It helped. Caleb felt a wave of relief wash over him. The moment they stepped outside, Maya suddenly reached out and took his hand, not tightly, not desperately, but gently, like she was silently thanking him. Caleb squeezed her hand once, his heart full. He realized then that doing the unthinkable, asking for help, reaching out, opening the ranch to others, was the bravest thing he had ever done. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't failure. It was love. And it was saving them both. That night, as they drove back to the ranch, the sky stretched wide above them, filled with thousands of stars. Maya leaned her head against the window, watching the passing fields. She whispered, almost too softly to hear, "Thank you for everything." Caleb didn't need more words. That simple sentence was enough. For the first time in a long while, hope didn't feel like a distant idea. It felt real, living right beside him in the passenger seat. And he knew the journey wasn't over. But together, they were finally walking toward the light. The next morning arrived quietly, with a soft golden light spreading across the ranch fields. The sun rose slowly over the hills, as if it, too, was tired from the long night that had passed. Ethan stood by the porch, looking out at the open land in front of him. The grass moved gently with the wind, and the air felt cool and peaceful. But inside him, everything was still heavy and uncertain. The day felt calm, yet he knew calmness did not erase problems. It only gave space to understand them better. Sarah woke up a little later. She looked around her room, feeling the light touch of morning on her face. It reminded her of the conversation she and Ethan had shared the night before, the moment she told him she couldn't handle everything anymore. She still felt embarrassed and fragile, but she also felt strangely lighter. Saying the truth aloud had taken something off her heart. She stepped outside and saw Ethan standing quietly. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at her with soft eyes that showed he had not forgotten anything. They both walked together to the barn, side by side, not talking yet, but the silence between them no longer felt sharp. It felt like a healing silence, the kind that gives space to breathe. Sarah noticed Ethan glancing at her now and then, checking silently if she was okay. She didn't mind. She knew he was trying, in his own quiet way, to protect her without making her feel weak. Inside the barn, the horses moved slowly, waiting for their morning routine. The place smelled of hay and warm earth, the familiar scent that always calmed Sarah. She gently brushed one of the horses, her hands steadying with each stroke. Ethan began feeding the animals, moving with a more thoughtful rhythm than usual. They worked in silence, but their hearts were not silent at all. Both of them were trying to understand how to move forward without hurting each other again. After a few minutes, Ethan finally broke the quiet. His voice was gentle, and he didn't try to sound strong or stubborn. He simply spoke like someone who was determined to understand. "Sarah," he said softly, "last night, when you said you couldn't handle it, I realized I've been focusing too much on fixing things my way. I didn't stop to see what you needed. I just kept going further, thinking that being strong meant pushing harder. But maybe real strength is something else." She stopped brushing the horse and looked at him, surprised. His words were honest, unpolished, and spoken from a place he usually hid from the world. Seeing this side of him touched her deeply. "I wasn't blaming you," she replied carefully. "I never wanted you to feel like you were the problem. I just felt lost. Everything was getting too heavy, and I didn't want to fall apart alone." "I know," he said quietly. "And I'm sorry you felt alone. You shouldn't have." She took a slow breath and walked toward him. The barn was warm by now, filled with a mix of morning light and the soft sounds of animals. She stood in front of him, her eyes steady but gentle. "I think we both forgot that it's okay to slow down sometimes," she said. "We kept pushing forward because we thought that was the only way to survive. But sometimes, you don't need to go further. Sometimes you just need to stop and breathe." Ethan nodded, taking in every word. He realized how much he had missed the small signs, the moments when Sarah looked tired but said nothing, the days she smiled just to avoid worrying him. He felt responsible, not in a painful way, but in a way that made him want to do better. He realized that the unthinkable thing he had done wasn't any dramatic action, it was failing to listen, but now he wanted to change that. They finished the morning work together, slowly, without rushing. Afterward, Ethan suggested they walk along the fence line, something Sarah used to enjoy but hadn't done in months. They walked across the grass that still held traces of dew, and the wind brushed gently against their faces. The ranch stretched out around them, wide and peaceful. Sarah felt a bit more open with each step. While walking, she shared memories from before everything became overwhelming. Small memories like how she loved the sound of rain on the barn roof, or how she missed watching sunsets from the left hill instead of from the porch. Little things she had kept inside because she thought they didn't matter anymore. But now, speaking them felt comforting. Ethan listened with real attention, not interrupting, not trying to solve anything, just listening fully. For Sarah, that alone felt like healing. When they reached the far end of the ranch, they sat on a flat rock that overlooked the fields. The view was wide and open, like a giant green blanket stretching to the horizon. Sarah closed her eyes, breathing deeply. For the first time in a long while, the view didn't make her feel small or overwhelmed, it made her feel free. Ethan watched her quietly. Seeing her finally relax made something inside him soften. He realized how strong she truly was, not because she kept going without complaining, but because she finally admitted she needed help. That was real courage. And he knew he needed to match that courage. "Sarah," he said after a long moment, "I want us to start doing things differently. Not pushing until we break. Not pretending everything is fine when it's not. I want us to talk more. Really talk. Even about the hard things." She opened her eyes and looked at him. There was no fear in his voice this time. No frustration. Only sincerity. "I'd like that," she answered. "And I'll try too. I won't hide how I feel anymore." They stayed there for a while, letting the quiet world around them settle into their hearts. It wasn't a dramatic moment. It wasn't a sudden miracle. It was simple, real, and calm, exactly what they both needed. Eventually, they walked back to the ranch house. The day moved on gently. They ate lunch together, worked a little, rested a little, and talked openly about the things they had ignored before. Their steps were slow, but they were steady. Every moment felt like a small step toward something healthier. By evening, the sky turned orange and pink. They stood outside together, watching the sunset. The colors painted the sky in soft layers, and birds flew across the horizon. Sarah leaned slightly toward Ethan. Not out of fear, but out of comfort. He put his arm around her, carefully, as if reminding her that he would be more mindful now. She spoke first, her voice almost a whisper. "Thank you for not giving up on me." I never will," he replied. "But I've learned not to push too far either. We'll go forward together, not faster than we need to." A small smile formed on her face. She felt safe, not because everything was perfect, but because they finally understood each other again. The ranch lights flickered on, glowing warmly against the darkening sky. A gentle stillness spread across the land, and the cool evening air touched their skin. It felt like a new beginning, not loud or dramatic, but real and steady. The unthinkable thing Ethan had done wasn't something terrible. It was something difficult. Something many avoid. He changed. He listened. He stepped back instead of pushing too hard, and in doing so, he helped Sarah find her strength again. Together, they walked back inside the house, ready to rebuild everything with patience, honesty, and care. Their story did not end with tension or pain. It ended with understanding, a quiet, strong understanding that would guide them forward. And for the first time in a long time, both of them felt hopeful again.